You wake up with your heart already slamming against your ribs at over 1,000 beats a minute. Not because you're scared, because you're a hummingbird and this is just Tuesday. You have maybe 6 hours of fuel left in the tank before your body starts shutting down from starvation. No pressure. Let's get moving. You started out even smaller than this. Way smaller. You hatched from an egg about the size of a coffee bean, one of the smallest eggs any bird on Earth lays. Blind, featherless, and roughly the size of a bumblebee. You couldn't fly. You couldn't even really move much. All you could do was sit in a nest woven out of spiderweb and lichen, no bigger than a walnut, and wait to be fed. Your mother did this alone. Your father left the second mating was over and never came back. No co-parenting, no shared custody, no follow-up visit. He's out somewhere doing courtship dives for the next female, while you're a naked, helpless speck, relying entirely on one exhausted bird to keep you alive. That's not a tragic backstory. That's just how hummingbirds do business. Every single generation. You grow fast because you have to. 3 weeks after hatching, you fledge. You leave the nest and you're expected to fly, feed and survive without a single follow-up visit from either parent. No training wheels. No trial run. One day, you're being fed regurgitated nectar and insects, and the next, you're supposed to be a self-sufficient flying machine capable of outmaneuvering hawks. And here's the part nobody tells you at the start. Most hummingbirds don't make it through their first year. Cold snaps, bad luck, an empty flower patch at the wrong moment, a storm that flattens the nest before you're even old enough to fly. Any of it can end you before you have a story worth telling. So if you're still alive by this point, congratulations! You already beat odds that killed most of your siblings. Let's talk about your daily life, because daily life for you is closer to an extreme endurance sport than a routine. You live wherever there are flowers, dense rainforest, open desert, high alpine meadow, or just somebody's backyard feeder in the suburbs, and wherever that happens to be, you will defend a patch of it like your life depends on it. Because it does. You need to eat more than your own body weight in nectar every single day just to break even. That means visiting somewhere between 1 and 2,000 flowers before the sun goes down, hovering at each one for a second or two, drinking and moving on, over and over, thousands of times without a lunch break. Imagine your actual job was eating an amount of food equal to your entire body weight every day for the rest of your life, or you die. That's Tuesday for you too. And Wednesday, and every day after that. So how do you survive the night when there's no nectar, no flowers open, and no way to refuel for 8 straight hours? You don't survive it the way most animals do. You shut yourself down completely. Every night. And sometimes even in the middle of a cold day when food gets scarce. You drop into a state called torpor. Your heart rate, the same one slamming past 1,000 beats a minute in flight, crashes down to as low as 50 beats per minute. Your body temperature falls until it's nearly the same as the air around you. Your breathing slows to almost nothing. You go from a Formula 1 engine at full throttle to something that looks, and basically feels, like a corpse hanging upside down from a branch. If someone found you like that, they'd assume you were dead. Scientists believe this can cut your energy use by somewhere around 50 times compared to when you're active. The exact number depends on how deep you go and which species you are. But the idea is the same either way. You fake your own death every single night. On purpose, just to make it to breakfast. Now here's the thing that makes you genuinely unlike almost every other bird on the planet. Your wings. Other birds flap up and down, generating lift on the downstroke and coasting on the upstroke. Yours rotate in a figure-8 pattern, generating lift on both strokes, which means you can fly forward, fly backward, drop straight down, shoot straight up, and hover completely motionless in mid-air. Something almost no other bird on Earth can do. Your wings beat somewhere between 50 and 80 times a second, so fast they blur into a shimmer that gave you your name in the first place. Combine that wing speed with a heart that beats faster than any other warm-blooded animal alive, and you are, quite literally, one of the most extreme athletes in the entire animal kingdom, pound for pound. Except there's no off-season, there's no rest day, there's no injury reserve list. You live at the very edge of what a body your size can physically sustain, which means you are never more than a few bad hours away from running out of fuel completely and permanently. So how do you actually eat fast enough to keep up with a metabolism trying to bankrupt you by lunchtime? Your tongue isn't a straw, the way people picture it. It's more like a tiny elastic pump that unfurls out of your beak and snaps shut around nectar dozens of times every second, faster than a human eye can even follow the motion. That's the mechanism keeping you alive, hidden inside a tongue thinner than a piece of thread. But nectar alone won't cut it. Sugar gives you fuel, but not the protein you need to actually build muscle, feathers, and eggs, so you supplement your diet by snatching insects and spiders directly out of the air or plucking them straight off their own webs mid-flight, and that's exactly where things get uncomfortable, because sometimes the web wins. You're fast, you're agile, you can hover, dodge, and reverse direction faster than almost anything else with wings. But hummingbirds have been found dead, tangled in orb weaver spiderwebs, killed by the very webs they were raiding for food. You spend your entire life dodging bigger, scarier threats, and one of the things that can genuinely end you is an insect that just sat still and built a trap out of silk. There's something almost insulting about that if you stop to think about it. You won't have time to, because your predator list for something roughly the size of a ping pong ball is genuinely absurd. Hawks, shrikes, roadrunners, frogs, both green frogs and bullfrogs, which will snap you up if you get too close to the water's surface. Fish, largemouth bass have actually been recorded snatching hummingbirds right off the surface of a pond when they dip down to drink or bathe. And then there's the one that should really embarrass you. Praying mantises. An insect roughly your own size, sometimes smaller, has been documented ambushing and killing fully grown adult hummingbirds at feeders, simply by holding still and waiting for you to get close. You can outmaneuver a hawk in open air. You cannot outmaneuver a mantis standing perfectly motionless 3 inches from a sugar feeder. Your near-death moments aren't always about other species, though. Sometimes it's your own kind. Defending your feeding territory means full-speed aerial chases against rival males, wingtips clipping past each other at speeds that would be fatal collisions for a body this small and this fragile. You're willing to risk your life over a single feeder, a patch of flowering bushes, a few square feet of airspace. Because for you, that airspace is genuinely the difference between eating today and starving tonight. Domestic cats near feeders add another layer entirely. Outdoor cats are considered one of the single biggest human-caused killers of hummingbirds, picking off birds that are distracted mid-feed and never see it coming. And then there's mating season, which somehow manages to be both the most impressive and the most one-sided arrangement in your entire life. When it's time to attract a female, the male doesn't approach her gently, doesn't offer her food, doesn't build her anything. He just performs a death-defying stunt, repeatedly in front of her. He climbs 60-90, sometimes over 100 feet straight up into open air, then drops, nose first, at speeds that can reach 60 miles an hour, pulling up just inches from her head at the very last possible second, using his outer tail feathers to rip out a sharp burst of sound as he pulls out of the dive. He does this over and over, angling his body so the sun catches his throat feathers at just the right moment to flash color at her. It's essentially a fighter jet flyby. Except the fighter jet weighs less than a nickel and is doing this entirely to get a date. If she's impressed, the actual mating lasts about 3 to 5 seconds. Male hummingbirds don't have external genitalia. It's a quick touch of the bird's cloacus, sometimes called a cloacal kiss, and then it's over. And the male? He's already leaving. He'll go find another female somewhere else in his territory and start the entire dive routine over again. Sometimes mating with several different females in a single season. Meanwhile, she is the one who builds the entire nest from scratch, sometimes making well over 100 trips for material like spiderweb, lichen and soft plant down in a single day, incubates the eggs completely alone, feeds the chicks completely alone, and raises them completely alone, all while still needing to eat her own body weight in nectar every day just to keep functioning. He risked his literal life in a 60-mile-an-hour stunt dive to win her over, and then contributed absolutely nothing afterward. If a human did this, we'd have several unflattering words for it. For hummingbirds, it's just Tuesday, again, every single breeding season, for the entire species. But none of that, not the predators, not the courtship, not the nightly near-death shutdown, is the single most brutal thing you will ever do. That comes once a year, in the fall, if you happen to be a ruby-throated hummingbird getting ready to migrate south for the winter. You are going to fly across the entire Gulf of Mexico, non-stop. Up to 500 miles, over open water, in a straight line, with absolutely nowhere to land in between. No islands to rest on halfway through. No flowers to refuel at. No option to simply get tired and turn back if the crossing goes badly. To prepare, you nearly double your entire body weight in the days beforehand, gorging on nectar and insects until you're carrying almost as much fat as your entire lean body mass. Essentially turning yourself into a tiny feathered fuel tank with wings attached. Then you burn through almost all of that fat reserve during the crossing itself, arriving on the other side running on fumes, sometimes so exhausted that you can barely make it the last few feet to solid ground before collapsing. And if your math is even slightly off, if a headwind kicks up partway through, if the weather turns without warning, if you simply misjudged how much fuel a 500-mile flight actually requires, there is no rescue boat, there is no safety net, there is no second attempt. You simply run out of energy somewhere over open water. And that's the end, quietly, with no one watching. Every single year, for generation after generation, hummingbirds have been betting their entire lives on their own stored body fat and an unforgiving flight plan with zero margin for error. And most of the time, remarkably, it works. That's really the part that should terrify you the most. If you survive that crossing, and if you already survived the brutal odds of your first year of life before it, you could actually live a surprisingly long time for something this small. 5 years is typical. Sometimes 10. The oldest documented hummingbird on record, a female broad-tailed hummingbird banded as an adult in Colorado in 1976, was recaptured at the exact same location 11 years later, making her at least 12 years old at the time. 12 years for a creature that weighs about as much as a single coin. That is a genuinely wild flex for something with a heart rate that never really learned how to relax, even for a second, but most of you don't get anywhere close to that. And when the end finally comes, it's rarely dramatic. There's no epic last stand against a hawk, no cinematic final battle. You die the boring way, a sudden cold snap that catches you without enough fat reserve stored up, a window you didn't see coming, sheer exhaustion partway through a migration you'd made successfully every year before, or a fungal infection called aspergillosis, picked up from moldy nectar left too long in somebody's dirty backyard feeder. One completely ordinary day, your body, the one that's been redlining since before you could even fly, simply runs out. And afterward, you decompose so quickly that people almost never actually find a dead hummingbird lying in the wild. You just vanish, without a trace, without a funeral, without anyone noticing, you're gone. Which is either strangely poetic, or exactly what you'd expect from a creature that spent its entire existence running on empty, and never once slowed down to properly rest. You spent your whole life with a heart that refused to idle, over 1,000 beats a minute in flight, as low as 50 at night, and then, one ordinary day, 0. Turns out, live fast, die broke wasn't just an expression somebody made up. For you, it was every single Tuesday, right up until the Tuesday it finally wasn't. If your own heart rate went up even once during all of that, congratulations! You now know exactly how a hummingbird feels, all day, every single day of its short, relentless life. Subscribe if you'd like to survive your next life with me.